This is Andy.
And this is Matt.
And you're listening to
The Hop Podcast with no name.
What a dumb name.
It's so stupid. Hello and welcome. Just a quick word before we jump into the first episode of the Hop Community Podcast. It's sort of a what is this? So we set out to have some conversations with individuals who are navigating their own hop journey. So the goal being people in organizations sharing their wins, their frustrations, lesson learned, some setbacks, struggles, all of that, and hopefully to give this sense of, as the name states, a sense of community. So anyone who's listening and maybe going through their own journey can hear what it's like in someone else's shoes, maybe take some good lessons learned and some takeaways, or even reach out to us and share some feedback. So it's not replacing the Hop Podcast with no name. It's going to be just additional episodes we're able to put out, and we really hope you enjoy it. So here it is, the first episode of the Hop Community Podcast. All right, episode 1 of the Hop Community Podcast, which may or may not be the name by the time this gets out. And I am happy to have my first guest, Arlis, here. How you doing, Arlis?
How's it going, Matt?
It's going. I'm really excited. We've done some prep conversation, and all the prep conversation has been how there's no prep. Basically, right. It's just
that's
us,
perfect, right?
Exactly, just us.
This should go perfect.
We'll just have a conversation, and we'd set out to make this sort of podcast about people who are sort of living through this hop journey in whatever way that is. And you've done this for a while in a lot of different places, so I thought it'd be a good first guest to have.
Yeah, I'm not saying I've been successful, but I've been doing it, right?
Yeah, right. It's the attempts. So why don't we start there? I think it'd be great just to get a sense of what your journey's been, however specific or high level you want to be, to sort of get into this conversation in this moment.
Okay. Well, I'll share this with you. This is something a lot of people don't know. So probably about 2014, I got so sick and tired with the safety field. Like, it felt like everything that Conklin and Andrew and everybody explains, I was feeling that. I was like, it doesn't matter what I do. We're going to get the same results. We're just banging our head up against a wall. And so I literally started looking at other professions. Like, can I just get out of safety altogether? Because it's just a waste of my time.
Yeah.
And you're going to be amazed what was one of the professions I was looking at. Now that we know Redonda, I was actually looking at going into maybe something in the medical field, nursing, something like that. and then they were like, obviously I had to go back to school for all this other stuff, so it didn't happen. And then 2015 enters Todd Conklin. I was working at Chevron at the time, and we brought him into a little conference room. So it was really kind of cool because we were close quarters and we could ask questions. And it's really funny because in my head, Todd started talking about the pyramid. In my head, I was like, hey, Todd, I disagree with that. But the truth is, I probably sounded more like a mouse and was like, hey, Mr. Conklin,
I respectfully,
I remember,
maybe not. Maybe I don't agree totally. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was really funny because I remember liking and agreeing with everything he said except about the pyramid. And so I never forget, Todd said something. He goes, Arlis, you seem like a smart guy. And he said, so what you're saying, if 29 people sprain their ankle, that somebody's going to die. He said, you've got to be smart enough to see that's stupid. And I was like, that's not stupid. That's science. That is science, And so that night, I go home and I'm pulling off all my old textbooks from college and stuff, and the pyramid's in there, and so it's validated. I'm like, it's right there, and it's a confirmation bias, but it started tweaking that inside of me that I just couldn't get away from it. And then what really kind of pushed me over the edge was the very first learning team. And then I got to see it in practice and what it looked like. And I'm going to share this with you too, Matt, because this is funny. I've told Bob, but the first learning team I did, I listened to podcast 17. I think it was pre-accident investigation podcast 17. Bob, they had Bob on there talking about operational learning teams. And I got on, I listened to that and I said, oh my, I'm going to do a learning team. So I built this incredible PowerPoint for the workers. And I was going to go in there and be this really smart guy and explain all this stuff. And I was building a spreadsheet and I was trying to figure out how to create a dashboard and all this wonderful stuff. And I said, well, I said, why don't I just call Bob? So I called Bob, and I didn't realize back then that was a big deal, just picking up a phone and calling people, which is kind of one of those things I do now a lot. But I called Bob, and I never forget, because Bob didn't realize I just spent 2 days working on all this crap.
Mm-hmm.
And Bob goes, Arlis, just don't turn it into a program. Just walk in there and have a conversation. I was like, look at everything I just built for this.
But look at the screens. Look at what I did.
But yes. I mean, it was going to be incredible. The workers were going to learn so much from me.
Yeah,
and,
obviously.
Which is the opposite way, right? But it was the best advice I'd ever been given, because what I didn't realize up until that point, I had never really listened. I'd wanted them to listen to me, because my viewpoint was, if they'll just listen to what I'm saying, then we're going to stop having issues. That was always my viewpoint.
Yeah.
And so I walked in there, humbly listened to the workers, and probably still to date the best learning team I've ever done.
Wow. That's a depictive journey, and I can imagine the need to teach the workers versus the need to learn is a drastic shift. What did you, when you walked out of that first learning team, were you sold? Like, this is the way. What was it like after that?
It was, I'll put it this way. I've never done an RCA since 2015. I can't do it. If they stick me in a room to do an RCA, it becomes a learning team. Like, I can't get away from it. It's literally a part of my DNA now.
Yeah.
I can't do it differently.
Which you've just opened up another can of worms that I find fascinating. You do this learning team, and you think to yourself, hey, I'm putting words in your mouth, but I've never gotten this level of information or understanding about the process. I can't believe it. This is amazing. Bob's amazing, which we know to be true. And then I'm not going to do RCAs anymore. How did that sell internally to your boss at the time? Hey, I know we have this mandate from corporate to do it this way. I'm not going to do it. What was that like? Or how did you live in two worlds at the same time?
So what was interesting, so I've had to do RCA since, and what's so crazy is the RCA process, it is so hard to make that process not push to a person. Mm-hmm. It really pushes to that failure of the person. But what I've learned is moving into this, the hop thinking and learning teams, is now I'll get in that RCA space and I give them what that RCA is looking for, kind of, but then I have all this other context. And so what I've figured out, it's really just a learning team report out. Mm-hmm. Because I'm going through and I'm saying, this is what the RCA, and that linear aspects of that failure, this is what the RCA found, but let me tell you what the worker was thinking. Let me tell you, and what's so crazy is leaders are interested in that stuff. I just don't think we give it to them enough. I think we think that they don't want it, so we don't give it to them as often.
And so how has that made its way to you? I mean, you're forced to enter this RCA data into a defined program, I'm guessing, through whatever suite of tools you have. Are you then sending an email? Or are you just adding so much data into it? Like, how is the data itself getting to the leaders for them to come to you and be like, Arlis, tell me more about this?
9 times out of 10, I'm setting up a call.
Gotcha.
And I'm gonna have that conversation, because I create like a 1-page report out mm-hmm. for that kind of learning team information, but it's so much better if you can have that conversation. But the 1 page actually works as well, because it's got that context built into it.
Gotcha. So you're including the context.
It does both.
Yep, including some of the context, at least in the prescribed report out that you're required to do. But then you're saying, I have so much more that I can share.
Right. But I used to protect leaders from that information. So if I could share this story with you. So it's pre this shift in thinking. What is it? I get them confused. Red pill before the red pill moment.
Yeah.
Before the red pill moment, I was safety guy. We had a job. And I never forget, we had a crane operator pulling a 50-ton crane into the unit. And when he made a turn, he crushed a welding machine. Like he totally just destroyed this welding machine. But what was scary about it is literally there was a maintenance guy working inside the welding machine, checking the oil, doing all that stuff. And he was about 3 steps away, so much to the point the welding machine almost got thrown into him
Oh, wow.
whenever it hit it. Anyway, so I never forget, I do this big RCA. I looked brilliant, you know what I'm saying? I
Of
was
course,
sitting in
yeah.
front of everybody. It was flip charts. We're in a maintenance shop, which no distractions there. But I never forget, I looked at this crane operator. He's my favorite kind of crane operator. He's got gray hair.
Okay.
So it means he's probably been doing it a long time. But he was disconnected the whole time. And I remember I get to the end and I go, so Mr. Crane Operator, if you could go back in time, what do you think would stop this? Well, Matt, I still get emotional about this to this day because this was probably 2012,
Okay.
2011.
Yeah.
He said that was the 1-year anniversary of his daughter's death.
Mm.
His daughter had passed away 1 year prior to, and I never forget, in all my brilliance, I stood up in front of that group of people and I said, you know what, guys, this is our root cause, but we can't put that in the report because nobody's going to accept that.
Yeah.
But I'm going, why can't we? Why? You know what I'm saying? Like, me today, I would absolutely put that information in that report. It would be the cornerstone of my whole conversation, because that's why we had the accident.
Yeah.
But it didn't fit into the
course
chart.
there's not a drop down menu that says
right,
something like that, right? And so you're talking about a really delicate balance between, hey, we have to get a root cause out there, and this is obviously, for this incident at this time, there is at least some of the cause is if not most of the cause is from this person's individual emotional state.
Right.
But it doesn't touch at all on the fact that we have a process problem going on. That is, we were able to run over this welding shop with this crane.
Right.
And so how do you balance that? How do you take it from, I know we're talking about this incident, but there's still so much other richness to learn about the process. How does that dynamic flow in your head?
So it's really interesting. This could be a really big conversation, but
good thing we have a platform to do it on now.
Wait, say that again?
Yeah, it's a good thing we have a platform to do it, to have this big conversation.
Yes, exactly. Well, if you think about it, and this is where this conversation can get really deep. In every failure, there are linear and nonlinear aspects to that failure, if there's people involved, right? And the challenge is processes like the RCA are brilliant at unlocking linear failure. They're not that great. They don't do as good unless, and I may move us a little bit here,
sure,
but unless that facilitator has kind of been red pilled a little bit, and then they're going to incorporate that nonlinear thinking into that RCA process. But typically it's a very linear process, and it unlocks that linear process. So what we have to teach our leaders is that whenever they look at that, their understanding is going to be the linear aspects of that process, right?
Yep.
So their understanding is going to make sense. Their recommendations are going to be great recommendations, right? There's going to be value added. But I love what Decker says when he talks about only the people in the system, in a complex system, can understand that system. If you can understand it and you're not in the system, then the system's not complex, right? Mm-hmm. So what's really interesting, or what we've got to get leaders to start seeing, is that their value, they definitely add value in that non-linear aspect. But when it becomes, in the linear, but when it comes to the non-linear, that's where we've got to get them to start asking questions and start listening. And then that's how we actually can start moving the needle. So both are still great. You know what I'm saying? We still use RCAs everywhere and they work and they do a great job. But if there's a person dynamic there and that nonlinear dynamic exists, then it really sounds a lot more like a conversation than a process. if that makes any sense.
It does. It does. It's I've heard Andrea say this before. It's if you want, if someone's, hey, we need an RCA done for X, Y, or Z incident. It's almost like an approach like, hey, I can bring you one of each, or I can bring you both of these, but I can bring you a snapshot. I can bring you a picture of what happened at that moment, at that time, and we may never see that moment in time happen again. Or I can bring you the story of work that got us to this snapshot happening, and I can bring you both, right? Like I can tell you specifically for this incident what happened. It's not nearly as interesting to me as the process that got us to this snapshot.
Right.
And it's leading me to my next question. I know you've been responsible for educating, and this is a word I don't know that I want to use, educating leaders.
Right.
How has that gone? I mean, just I'm pushing all of the balls into your court for this one because it's such a big question. But talk to me about. I'd love to know everything about successes, failures, wins, losses, struggles, opportunities when it comes to, okay, I sat down and Todd Conklin broke my brain and I'm doing things differently. And now I have to go and educate someone who, just by the nature of hierarchy, has authority over me and everything that I do in some ways. So what's that like? Talk to me about educating those above us.
Well, it's different every person you talk to, right? And I'll say this for people that's trying to actually push this through their organization, you fundamentally have to find those leaders in the organization. And so what kind of my approach is I go leader to leader trying to find that leader. And eventually you're going to find somebody that this is going to click to them. And then that becomes your hinge pin, that becomes your person. And then that leader is going to help you shift other leaders and start moving other leaders. But you've got to find one in the beginning. But it's different. I can say this. You can come up with any approach you want, and I can promise you it may work and it may not. Like it's to give you an idea, one of the leaders that really saw a shift with this. I never forget 3 slides into a presentation where I was trying to sound smart. 3 slides in, he goes, "Hey, I just want to know, how is this different than an RCA, a learning team versus an RCA?" And I said, "Well, the truth is, I've never had a worker come up to me after an RCA and go, 'Arlis, the next time you do an RCA, I would like to be there.'" I said, but here goes the opposite. I've never done a learning team where I haven't been requested by workers to do another one. I've always walked out of the room and they're going, "Hey, you know where we could do one?" And as soon as that one leader heard that, his whole world shifted, and then he became a proponent and started studying this stuff on his own. And so it's going to be different. Unfortunately, it's going to be different for everybody. I would love to give you that secret sauce, but it's going to be different for different people. And then what I do is, if I can't move leaders, I try to move the leaders around those leaders. And if I can't move those leaders, then I'll even start working and exposing those leaders to people outside the organization, to leaders in other organizations that's had this shift in thinking, so that it gives some validity to what you're saying. And then what you never know is when you do have that conversation, when that person has a conversation with like a leader at another company, right? They're going to start hearing that person say some of the things you said, which gives you a little bit more value, validity to what you're actually trying to push. And they're going to come back to you, hopefully, and say that. Now, I will say, like, I invested one time, probably a year and a half into one leader. And I set him up with another person in his equal position at a major oil company. I mean, I thought, I'm doing everything perfect. Like everything's going as planned. And then one day I'm on vacation and he picks up a phone because he couldn't handle it anymore. And he called me and he was very animated in his conversation. And he was just mad because I refused to admit that all accidents are preventable as a principle. Like I refuse to admit that.
Yeah.
And he's like, "You have to believe this." And I'm like, "Do you hear yourself? Like, I can't believe something that I don't believe." And he's like, "Well, you got to quit saying it." And I was like, "I can't say something that I don't believe." Like,
you have
I was like,
values.
we're at a,
yeah.
right, we're at an impasse here.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting because with that leader, even in the moment where he's raging against me, I was still trying to figure out a way to reach him.
Mm-hmm.
And because what I told him is, as I said, you love everything that I'm doing. Like you love the output of everything I'm doing. The problem is you don't get there with your thinking. You only get there with my thinking.
Mm.
So if I adopt what you're saying, then everything you love about what I'm doing stops. Like it's going to go away. And he didn't like that statement.
Yeah, doing what we're doing is going to get us what we've been getting, right? That's sort of the mantra. It's you said I don't have any secret sauce for you, but I think in a sense you did, because you talked about don't take a one-on-one approach. Don't say I'm going to focus on this leader only. I'm going to look across the organization at whatever leaders I'm talking to, and I'm going to just explain what I'm doing differently. And then there's another really good element. If it's just what Arlis says, it's easy to dismiss Arlis.
Right.
It's easy to dismiss one person. But if you're able to say it's not just me, it's these people, and it's these successful people, and it's these people who have no direct ties to me that are doing things differently, because the fear of missing out in a business world is huge, right? The competitive advantage you can have or disadvantage by falling behind in this situation is huge. And so I think you did add a lot there. Whether it's just, I think the problem we constantly see is that it's hard. It's hard.
It's hard. And let me say this too, because as you were saying that, I thought about this. I believe this for people that are pushing HOP, they really should be the least selfish people in the organization.
Mm.
And if you want it to move, because I really think what caused HOP to move early on back in 2015 was how giving the community was. And how willing people in other organizations were to have conversation with me that was at that point in time absolutely nobody. They didn't even know who I was, but they would stop and set up a call and give me everything they had. And that's beautiful. But I will say this, I've seen people, and we've all worked with these type of people because you got every type in an organization.
Sure, yeah.
That they want to hold the information close to themselves and they want to be the expert. But the truth is you got to give it away. So I give you an example. I had a guy one time, he said, "Hey, I'm going to use these 5 slides you created." And he said, "Don't worry, I'm going to give you credit." I said, "Don't give me credit." And he's like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Do you believe what you're saying?" He goes, "Yes." I said, "Then these are your words. This isn't." And I was like, "It can't be Arlis's HOP thing.
Yeah.
Arlis's learning teams. It can't be that. It's got to be you. If you believe it, then present it, you know?" And he was like, "That's interesting." And I was like, "But it's got to, that's how you kind of move it." But if you, as a practitioner, if you're holding your cards to yourself and you're trying to make sure that you get promoted through the organization, you may actually be part of the problem. It's actually slowing it down.
That's a great point. You'd mentioned something earlier that it draws me back to in our 3 minutes of prep for the recording. You talked about being a part of both the field side and the corporate side in your journey.
Right.
And I'm always so caught by this question. Anytime I'm talking to leaders and they're thinking about how they implement this, their first thought, and I applaud them for the thought, is we need to get it down to the front line.
Right.
Now, we believe that this is really a leadership philosophy, and that, of course, you want your front line to know what's happening, but it really needs to start as a leadership challenge and thought process. Where have you seen this work well, getting to the front line? Or have you seen it? And if you have, where?
So I'll say this. So getting it to the front line is kind of pointless. What I've seen, what's been my experience is the front line, when you say, "This is what we're doing," I've actually seen the frontline workers go, "Thank God y'all are finally listening." Like they know all this stuff. Like when you tell them that, the black line, blue line model, they know that. Like we are not shaking the tree and getting any fruit out of that.
Yeah.
But like, if I could share this one story, it may kind of drive it home as far as that comment. But I never forget, I did a learning team early on. It's like my 3rd or 4th one. And I had the forklift trainer. We had a ton of forklifts in the facility, I think like 50 or 60. And that may not be a bunch to some, but we had a pretty large warehouse area. And so I had the forklift trainer and another gentleman that operated forklifts in the warehouse. And I listed out and I said, I'm going to cut it off at 6 action items. So here are the 6 action items, and everybody in the room, because there was like 8 or 10 people, I said, everybody pick 2 action items, because you can't work on all 6, because,
Sure.
we're also trying to run a business. These 2 forklift operators got up there and put their initials down beside all 6. So I'm like, here we go. They don't understand what I'm trying to tell
Yeah.
them. And so I looked and I said, look, guys, hey, you can't pick all 6. You've got to pick 2. And I never forget, Matt, the forklift operator that had been in that facility for 15 years that trained other forklift operators said, Arlis, if you don't mind, we want to be involved with every one of them, because he goes, the truth is, nobody's ever asked us what we thought. And I'm going, are you kidding me? The guy, he's been in this warehouse for 15 years and he's the trainer, and nobody's ever said, hey, what do you think about this? Nobody's ever said that. And when he said that, I remember looking back, even me, I was the world's worst. I was the world's worst of going out there and saying, okay, I've got it figured out, guys. Let me tell you what you need to do. And their eyes are rolling back in their head and they're going, here we go again. Right. And so being experiencing that at a field level, in seeing that worker engagement, the value of the worker, and I'll say that seeing the change in the leadership's mindset on the value of the worker was probably the most powerful thing I've ever seen. And that's this type of thinking can actually drive that.
Yeah, I like to think there's like some sort of, I don't know, experience that a while ago, I feel like the way that we solved the problems was just reminding everyone that there were expectations and procedures and to follow them. And then
Right.
and then there was this moment of time that, from what I've heard, where I imagined people were like, no, we got to learn from those doing the work. And they would gather information, and then they go to a room where they have like a bunch of red yarn and pictures, and they would get some version of the problem, and they'd go and solve it, and then to your point, bring it back and be like, hey, I've solved it. I got it figured out. We're gonna do this. Still not even engaging the workers in any sort of problem definition or solutioning. And now it's gone such a long way. We recognize that we don't need the red yarn and everything. We just need to have conversations with those doing the work, define it with those doing the work, and solve with those doing the work, because they're going to have the best solutions, right? Like that's it's such a change though in the dynamic that we've experienced over years and years and years.
Well, and the dynamic is listening to the worker, but that becomes natural when you as a leader understand that you don't understand the work. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can understand an aspect of the work, but I don't understand it fully.
Yep.
And as soon as that clicks in a leader's head, then that leader knows whenever they start hearing about the struggles and challenges with completing work, then they know what they need to do. They need to go have a real conversation with a worker. And it's never failed me so far to date. It's always been a positive.
Well, it's that we constantly talk about black line, blue line, right? I think if a leader's philosophy is that there's a black line and we need them to be on the black line, all your solutions are getting them back to the black line. If you fear the blue line, right? If the fear is and Andrew explained this to me early on about the idea of drift, and that we're always sort of moving away in a negative direction from the black line until eventually we run into a hazard and we have an incident. And that's such an oversimplified model of work.
Yep.
And so of course as a leader, my response would be, well, if we see him on the blue line, let's get him back on the black line. I understand the work to go back to the earlier part of the episode, in the linear sense of, this is how our product gets out the door. This is how our work gets completed. But they don't understand the nonlinear part of what it's actually like to do the work. And without that understanding,
how variable it can be.
Exactly. Right. And without that understanding, then our solutions are always get them back to the black line.
Right.
And you're talking about the evolution from that.
Well, and what's interesting too is, like, I had a leader one time, a VP asked me, he goes, Arlis, I want to know, how do you get workers to share this information with you? And I was like, man, it's brilliant. Like, you're going to be blown away by this process. I get them in a room and I go, so tell me about your work. And I was like, and he's like, are you kidding me? That's all you do? And I said, I've never seen a worker that's struggling with a problem that doesn't want to talk about that struggle. Like, it doesn't exist. Like, the only reason why they will choose to not is because of me, or the organization limiting that conversation out of fear. So workers want to talk about their problems, and we've just got to start listening. That's the honest to God truth, and understanding that black on blue. I love Eric Hollnagel where he drew 1,000 blue lines, on the paper.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, to talk about how dynamic and how variable work is, that doesn't even do it justice. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's so freakishly dynamic their work is, and it's so simple for me to set at my desk in an air conditioned office and go, I would never make that choice. I would never do that. Obviously I wouldn't, because I would never be in the position that these folks work in every day. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. It's you just touched on a bunch of things, and I love the Hollnagel model. That's one that Andrew and I use when we talk about this stuff. We always use that one
Mhm.
because it's such a great depiction of even that is such an oversimplification of work, like you just said.
Right.
And so
Right.
if we're operating with even that baseline understanding, we're still going to be oversimplifying and putting in, because we then use it to say, okay, now I understand it well enough. Here's your solution, and that just, we kind of fall into that cycle. We've done it for years, and I say this all the time. Leaders have been conditioned. They were rewarded throughout their careers for being fast to solve problems.
Right.
And that's just what they're good at, and it's their instincts. And how do you get someone to fight against their instincts? It takes a lot of time and energy and effort.
But let me challenge you on this. So
Yeah.
is it their instincts, or have we conditioned them with really concise, fast information that pointed a finger at a worker?
I think both, probably, right? Like, I think inherently we want to solve problems quickly because we believe that the problem. I picture these leaders as I know they genuinely care about the people that work for them, and they want them to be
Right.
safe, and they want them to go home safe. So I think they view it as fast fixing to make sure people are safe.
Right.
But I think on the other side, by getting them fast information, we don't have the time to actually learn about the nonlinear part of work, as you said.
Well, and I've done it. I've given leaders information because I want to stop the bleeding. I want to stop the
Sure.
pressure. And I know if I say it was that guy and he's just a bad guy, then that's going to solve the problem. The organization is going to move on, and they're going to stop putting pressure on me. Right. And so I've given leaders that shortcut. Like, I'll share this story with you. So we had an incident, and I'll try to figure out how to not share with what organization
Sure.
this occurred.
Sure.
But in this incident, we did a RCA, and then the gentleman that facilitated the RCA said, "Hey, I think there's more here." So they brought me in to do a learning team, and I never forget. I'm on the call with the president of the organization, and he's definitely that type of leader that he likes things fast and furious, and like, give me the direct answer, I'll give you a direct answer. And I never forget, on that call, he made a statement. He said, look, like 2 slides in, look, if this operator didn't make this decision, we wouldn't be on this call today. Right. And he was about to wrap it up because he felt like he knew. And I remember going, oh crap, like, because this guy probably could eat me for lunch.
Sure.
So
Yep.
I was scared to come off mute. But at the same time, I felt like when I do a learning team, I owe it to the worker to make their voices heard, right? And so I never forget, I come off mute, and the worker, that leader, he's in the process of wrapping up the call. Like, he's going, okay, thanks everybody. And I waited that long to, you know what I'm saying? Because I was not happy about hitting that mute button. And so I come off mute and I said, hey, look, real quick, I just want to say this. I said, I think you're oversimplifying what these folks do greatly. And I said, if you look at it, we've got a 110-step procedure that's 55 pages long for loading a truck. And I said, so what we've done is we've figured out all the variables in a complex job, and we've wrote a procedure that works. I mean, it encapsulates all the potential variables of that work, but now it's too big to use. So I said, by that alone, just about that, the size of that procedure, we ought to recognize that their work is incredibly complex. And I said, and here goes the thing. It's loading a truck. It doesn't seem like it's that complex. I said, this is probably one of the most complex jobs we got in the company because all the different potential variables. And that leader goes, you know what, Arlis, you're probably right. And then he started asking for more information and wanted us to go back and get. So the challenge was the leader the problem in that scenario, or was the information we were given the leader the problem? I think the information we were given was the issue, personally. I think, like what you guys say a lot, great leaders make great decisions if they have great information. We've got to start giving them that great information. I think that's our job as practitioners.
Yeah, what a excellent story, an excellent point. It's a bit of like we can hope that leaders start asking for better information, or we can make it our point to bring better information.
Right.
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 And we probably, because of our responsibility as practitioners, we probably have to do both the bringing better information and educating as to why we're doing it. It's probably on us to do, and hope that by being consistent and showing the value. I talk about this a lot, like hey, historically, here's what we would have done in this situation, and here's the output we would have had. And by doing it a different way, here's what we're doing. And I think those stories really resonate with leaders.
Right.
Hey, we had this incident, and we've had the same incident 10 times, and every time we fired the person, or we wrote them up, or we did a stand down, some combination of all these. But in learning about it, here's what I learned, and here's what I'd actually recommend we try. That tells a really compelling story. And it's a lot easier for a leader to say, "Oh, okay, well, you're telling me why this is going to be different. I don't need to sign up for 1,000 more of these. Let me try it. Let me show you why I think there's going to be a different outcome." And that's all you're asking for, not to change how we do investigations forever. We're just asking to we think there's some value in this other thing, and let's give it a shot.
Well, and so I've been doing a learning team since 2015. I've had one learning team fail me. I've had one that didn't go well. And that was an interesting one. I'll share this and I'll shut up about that. But so I say that a lot. I never shut up for the record. But so I did a learning team, right? And I with this great group of guys. The shift supervisor was awesome. And after the learning team, it bothered the shift supervisor that the operator shared all the information with me, but not him. So he goes back in and he tells them, "Hey guys, I got an open door policy. If you've got problems, come talk to me." So then about a month later, they want me to do another learning team with this group. And they were all like arms folded, you're not getting anything out of me. And so the worst learning team ever, like it was horrible. And give you an idea, I won't go into the details, but one of the action items was chin straps on a hard hat. That says it all, right?
Yep. enough said.
So yeah. So anyway, after the learning team, I grabbed one of the operators. I said, "Hey man, like what's the problem?" This was a problem. They had so much respect for their supervisor that they felt like the learning team process threatened him and made him feel uncomfortable. So they said, "We're just not going to share anything on learning team." So I went back, talked to a supervisor. He had to go back to him and say, "No. I don't care who you tell. You've got to tell someone. But if you want to tell me, I'll always listen. But please." So that was the only one I ever did that failed, but it failed for actually a really good reason.
Yeah, that's a great story. I love it immediately reminded me that open door policy is something that I must have said 5 times a day as a leader. And it's a really good illustration of active versus passive learning, right? Like passive learning is, hey, I'm always going to listen. And I would say that you know me well enough to know that I was going to respond well. I wanted people to share with me. It's the switch, right? It's you can go and learn versus you can wait for someone to tell. And that's such a hard switch. I mean, and this supervisor, it was beloved, I'm sure, for a lot of reasons, and it's such a hard distinction to make. But that's a good reason why one would fail, right? Like, and it's also solvable, right? It's like, okay,
yes,
we can try again in the future. It's not doomed from here on out. Where we hear the horror stories of someone gets approval to run their first learning team, runs it, learns about someone not following a procedure, and then there's discipline handed out, and you can really never run a learning team again after that.
Well, and I'll say this too, as far as teaching people how to do learning teams, I've also, if that teaching doesn't go very well and they don't get to see it, I've also seen them have problems because people walk in and they've got an RCA mindset and they run a learning team like an RCA. So it's really good if they can see that process.
Yeah.
Actually see it in action.
Always helpful. Always helpful. All right. We've been going for almost 40 minutes. So I want to ask you a question that I think would be helpful, but you've experienced a lot of the changes and wins and struggles of going through this HOP journey. What advice would you give yourself starting out? And I asked this to ask if someone's tuning in and they're early on in their journey, what advice would you give them?
So I remember the best advice is if you believe it, start talking about it. So I waited probably a solid year because I thought that I had to know what Conklin knew. I had to sound like Conklin, and I thought I had to be at that level. But it's really about relationships and conversations. And you don't have to be at that level to actually start talking operational learning and these concepts to people. Because the truth is, I can't tell you how many times I've been in conversations with people, even as of recently. And those conversations actually are shifting and shaping my own personal opinion and my viewpoints, just like that conversation's shaping their viewpoints. So my biggest advice is don't wait. Don't think you've got to sound super eloquent. Don't think you have to know all the information. Don't think you've had to have read 50 books. It's just start doing it. And that's what I remember Bob saying, just go in there and talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually quite brilliant,
Yeah. It's really hard to break it, right? Like you just go in there and start talking. That's great advice. That's all I had. I mean, thank you, Arlis, for sharing everything and for telling your stories. Anything you want to end on or kick us out of here?
No, the journey still continues. I'll put it that way. I'll say this, Matt. It is an absolutely exciting time we live in safety. And there's so much, like even this morning, I learned some new stuff. There's so much stuff that's coming down the pipe. But the truth is for us as practitioners, is how do we actually absorb all this information and actually make it something useful to an organization? And that's where the rubber meets the road. And that's people, to me, the real heroes in the industry are the people that are quietly behind the scenes trying to have these conversations and shift viewpoints, because it's obviously at times it's not very popular. So they're going to be at the end of all this, whenever it's said and done, they're going to be the real heroes of these things.
I'll ask you one last question then, and this is just coming to me in sort of your final response. If you were to listen to the next episode of this, what do you hope someone would be talking about as a practitioner?
So, okay, for the practitioner, always, I love when people say, this is what worked for me in my organization.
Okay.
When you say that, I'm about to tune in and start listening, because it doesn't mean it's going to work for me or it's going to work for the next person, but it is kind of building that recipe for actually maybe having another thing you can actually try. So I'm always interested in how people are getting creative. It's like I started making these little micro videos that I would send out. Come to find out, VP's doing a lot of the same things and stuff. So I would love to kind of partner and learn how they're doing that. And maybe we can do some stuff together. Who knows? So
it's awesome.
Always how to actually make it tangible.
So basically learning what tools are in other people's tool belt and seeing what you can take from it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you, Arlis. I appreciate you being the first guest on this podcast.
The guinea pig. I'm literally the guinea pig.
Awesome. All right. Thanks.
Well, that's it.
Yep. Another one in the books. We did it.
If you want to send us any of your thoughts, actually fling us any of your thoughts, you can do so at the website www.hoppodcast.com.
That's HOPPODCAST.com.
It's still such a stupid name.
It's such a stupid name. We look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for listening.